Hi there and welcome to another weekly update. Now we're going to do something a little bit special this week. If you watch these regularly, you'll know I usually talk about what's new and interesting for Skype for Business developers, for Teams developers, for Office 365 developers. But we are post-Ignite, we're about a week after Ignite, and I wanted to talk to someone who was there and who understood all the different development news that was happening at Ignite. So I wanted to chat with Matt Landis of Landis Technologies. So Landis Technologies do a number of different software offerings that are based around Skype for Business and Teams. Matt himself is a developer, he's an MVP, and he's sort of deep into this world. So I thought it'd be really interesting just to call him up and talk to him, record the whole thing and use it instead of the weekly update. So yeah, that's what I've done this week. Enjoy. Before we start, something weird is happening with my computer's webcam, so it looks like I'm sitting in the dark. Apologies for that. I'm going to include it anyway because I think the most important part of the whole video is Matt, not me. Apologies for that, but I'll get it fixed soon. Thanks and enjoy the call.
Hi there, it's Tom Morgan here, and I'm joined this time by Matt Landis of Landis Technologies. Hi Matt, how's it going?
Hey, pretty good. Good.
Yeah, now I wanted to talk to you because we're a week more or less after Microsoft Ignite, and you were at Ignite and I wasn't. And you're also a Skype for Business developer, Teams developer. You're in that scene, and I know you kind of you keep track of all that stuff that's going on. So I wanted to just kind of talk to you and find out what's been going on and all the things I might have missed. So. One of the first things I wanted to talk about was that the kind of big announcement that happened at the Teams and Skype for Business keynote, the one with Laurie Wright and Bob Davis. Obviously, I was watching the live stream. I heard the news about the future of the way Skype for Business is versus Teams, and I've kind of heard the news. I've read the blogs. What was your impression as a developer? Because the thing that I picked up on was the change from unified communications to intelligent communications, and that kind of like stuck with me. But I wondered what your take was, because I know you're in the consultancy scene as well, so I thought it'd be really interesting just to hear your take on all of that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, very, very much the emphasis was Microsoft Teams. And of course that brings up the question, what are the developer tools going to be for Microsoft Teams? We know we might want some more things with Skype for Business, but at least we know what we have. What is there going to be? What is there, and what is there going to be for Microsoft Teams? And we already. It seems like, just to really jump to the end. It really seems like Graph is really where it's going to be at. I wasn't sure if there was going to be some kind of like with Skype for Business, you have UCWA and you have UCMA, but it seems like from the sessions, not that main keynote session, but the other developer sessions, it seems like they're kind of pointing in the direction of Graph, the Graph API.
I know one of the things that they were keen to stress is that Skype for Business isn't going away. There's going to be a 2019 Skype for Business. There's going to be a new version, and that sounds like it's good news for people who've invested in UCMA, people who've invested in client SDK applications. That's definitely still the case, right? So I kind of came at it quite positive, because all the old stuff will continue to work, but there's all this new stuff coming as well.
Yeah, and another piece to it, another thing to think of is the pieces that power the voice on Skype for Business Cloud PBX. Or Office 365 Cloud PBX. It really seems like call queues, auto attendance, they're going to get plumbed up to Teams. It's not like they're going to tear that all down and dismantle that. It really looks like, they're going to just kind of bring the plumbing over to Microsoft Teams. So, the tools that they use to make those, will continue to be relevant for Teams, it looks like.
Yes.
So maybe you want to add something to that.
That's cool. That's really interesting, isn't it? Because they've always, I know they were keen when they built those tools of saying, they're built on APIs that you can use as well. So it's really interesting to see them move them up. as well. So that's cool.
Yeah.
And one of the things I know I saw kind of some conversations going past on Twitter. I thought you might be able to hear, you know, probably more than I do about the infrastructure side of Skype for Business, whereas I'm much more sort of pure like development. I know you cross both those worlds, and the kind of SIP and not SIP of Teams, because I've heard people say it's not SIP. I've heard people say it's SIP. What's your answer there? And like, what about future interop and all that kind of stuff? So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it seems like, you know, what they're really using the last leg is, no, you know, to the Teams client is not SIP. That's what I'm understanding. I didn't dig into it in depth, but it seems like, you know, getting out, you know, from their infrastructure to the client, you know, behind the scenes, you know, plumbing between things, and obviously the SIP trunk providers, you know, that's obviously SIP. But it sounds like the, you know, what they're using to get out to the Teams client, it's getting pushed. SIP is getting pushed back further and further. Back, you know, to the things
and that makes sense, I guess, because SIP is very SIP is good if you've got, you know, if it's reliable, it's life and fancy and most bit. Of technology is better than SIP, so that makes sense actually. I mean, it's not really he's good at doing the like maybe the last mile using something else. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. You know, obviously they're going to have things like trying to accommodate, you know, the Cloud Connector edition at some level, and obviously there's going to be some SIP going on there, you know, with the SBCs, but that's getting a little bit away from development. But so getting pushed back to where it does its job the best. That makes sense. What it sounds like to me.
That's cool. And I saw as well that that you guys have announced a Teams attendant console, and that's built on the new Graph APIs. Is that correct? Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, yeah. So the kind of three things that we were talking about with our Teams attendant console is we have a UI that looks just like Microsoft Teams, just identical. And the other two pieces are probably the most interesting. So we are bringing Teams into the attendant console. So in other words, a group of users that are in members of a team, we can bring into the attendant console using the Graph APIs today. So those Graph APIs are already there. So, you know, querying and saying, you know, what teams am I a part of and who are the members of those teams, and then showing them in a nice UI that looks just like you want to make it, you can do today.
Yeah.
So the last piece, which is, you know, everybody's wondering, now how are you transferring a call to a Teams user, is obviously a big question, and that's dependent on the Skype to Teams interop, which essentially lets you call, you know, a Teams or Skype for Business user call each other. And that is currently not released. We've tested on versions we have, but it's not currently released. It was announced, but not released.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really good. So it's interesting that, yes, we're waiting for some things, but actually there's a lot you can do today. And you're showing that there's a lot that you can do with Graph even today, even knowing all the stuff that's coming down the line, plenty that can be done today.
Yeah, there's a lot of excitement coming in the future, of course, but even what we have, you know, we can do some pretty nice things. You know, essentially what we're doing, we're not really positioning it this way, but we're kind of bringing a converged Skype for Business and Teams kind of experience. We're not really, you know, we're not promoting it that way, but if you want to think about it, you know, really you have Teams, you have Exchange distribution groups and Skype for Business groups side by side, you know, without thinking about it, you know, you can switch between them interface, which when Teams first came out, that was kind of what people were requesting. You know, we're not really trying to make a Skype for Business Teams client, but in essence, you can do some nice things with Graph already.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Now, we've talked about this a little bit earlier in the call, but that breakout session on Tuesday, I've watched the video once. I'm going to have to go back and watch it again, I think. There was so much stuff in that. It was unbelievable. And I think, to your point, it's going to be, like you say, the Graph API is the one to keep an eye on, right? And it's interesting. I think it was Andrew Bybee said, stop thinking about the Graph API as a data store. Like, start thinking about it as like a way to get stuff done as well. And I thought that was really interesting. And yeah, that's going to be really, I think, interesting to see kind of how that evolves. And there was some great demos as well. I think either in that session or there was another session that David Newman did as well, right, with some like video manipulation demo stuff where he was changing, I think it's where he's changing the hue of the like the video feed. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, that session is a really good one. If anybody's interested in development, you should watch it. I'm getting confused. I think it's BRK 3037 or either BRK 2197. Those are I think those are the two sessions. One is kind of an overview. The other one drills in a bit more. But to what you're saying, it looks like they're splitting out the way they think about the API. They have a remote media and a local media.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting the way they're talking about that split, because they've never done that before, and it's interesting. It initially didn't make sense to me, but like it must be the way it's all put together on the back end. Like they seem to be important differences to think about.
Yeah, think about it this way. So remote media is things that you don't need the media on the machine that you're doing things. So IVRs, announcements, etc. You need only signaling. You don't necessarily need to be running the media through some processor or something. You upload media files and you say play media file. But you need to bring the media to the server that is doing whatever you wanted it to do. The local media way of doing it is when you want to bring the media to the machine or that you're and manipulate it. So when you don't have to get into the media stream, you use remote media. So you're just kind of signaling and saying, accept an input, transfer call, play this prompt, remote media. So IVRs, announcements, maybe I'll just stop there. That's how they mentioned it. But it's just so I don't mix something up. But then like local media is when you want to have direct access to the media down to the frames.
Yeah.
And then like you're saying, you can do things like change one of the colors or change a hue or record or transcribe. You get that and then do something with it.
And that's really, like, we've never been able to do that in UCMA, right? That's always been a missing, like, you could do it with the audio kind of, but you'd never been able to do it with the video feed. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, that's having that really fine-tuned control over it. So yeah, it's interesting. I was telling Dave Michaels was wondering, what are the kind of things happening with the APIs, and I said we can, they were demonstrating things we could never do before.
Yeah,
so
yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
cool. All right. I don't want to take too much of your time, but is there anything else that I might have missed from over here that kind of got covered in the, the side rooms, in the kind of the chats, apart from all the fun stuff? I don't want to hear about all the attendee celebrations. Don't make me envious. Just like anything I might have missed, right?
Yeah, well, there of course was a lot of questions. How are we going to do things in the future? And there was no concrete announcements on we're going to have you a UCMA replacement by X. It sounds like those announcements. It sounds like they're coming later in the year. They're going to give it a little more shape to when things come.
Okay. Yeah.
But another thing that I thought was interesting, and I don't know if you picked up on this, but they're talking about endpoints as bots. I think we kind of got used to calling them endpoints, and they're really, they talk about them. So in other words, so you make an announcement and you can call that thing. They're thinking it in the paradigm of bots. A thing you call or connects to your call. It's interesting. That's another thing, along with the local media, remote media. Think about those things that do things as bots. That's another thing. That was in sessions, not necessarily people that were talking.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that's an oddly overused. Like, you're right. We use the term bot to type of endpoint, and that you're saying they're almost flipping that on their head, and that's an interesting thing to think about, because
So they were saying remote media bots can do things like IVRs and be assigned a phone number. So, that's how they were talking about it.
Interesting.
A local media bot can join a meeting and change color of video, transcribe a call, or record a call.
Yeah. So it's an interesting way to think about it, because like bots, you think bot framework. So like I don't know. Yeah. Which comes in what? Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. Really interesting.
So yeah, the questions, I think on the side, the questions were, how are we going to, what are we going to do? Well, number one, Skype for Business Server, it's here. There's going to be a 2019 version of server. So, UCMA is still running some of those scenarios. And, moving forward, we'll get a little more coloring as to when Graph will be lit up with some of these things.
Yeah,
so.
Brilliant. All right, Matt, it's been brilliant. Thanks ever so much. Yeah, it's been really, really useful to catch up with you. And thanks ever so much.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Yep.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Cool.